Admiral Velthak stared at the massive screen floating in front of him. The blue light from the hologram made his grey alien face look even more tired. Around him, the command center of his huge warship felt empty and cold. Most of the control stations were dark now. Half of his officers were dead. He turned to face the group of surviving commanders who had gathered in the war room. These aliens had once been the most feared military leaders in the galaxy. Now they looked broken and confused. Some had bandages covering their wounds. Others couldn't stop their hands from shaking. The holographic display behind Velthak showed numbers that made no sense. Red dots represented destroyed Draxonian ships. There were so many red dots that they almost covered the entire star map. Green dots showed the human ships they had faced. The green dots were tiny compared to the sea of red. "Look at this," Velthak said, pointing at the display. His voice cracked as he spoke. "We brought 2,300 of our finest warships to conquer one small planet. The humans had only 23 ships to defend their world. Any military academy student would tell you this should have been the easiest victory in galactic history." Commander Zixara, whose ship had barely escaped the battle, leaned forward. "Admiral, how is this possible? Our weapons are centuries ahead of theirs. Our shields can stop anything they could throw at us. Our ships are bigger, faster, stronger, in every way." Velthak let out a bitter laugh. "That's exactly what I thought 3 months ago. That's what we all thought. We expected to be home celebrating within a week. Instead, we're sitting here with the ruins of our once great fleet, trying to understand how everything went so wrong." The room fell silent except for the quiet humming of the ship's engines. Several commanders looked down at their hands, unable to meet their admiral's eyes. They had all been there during the disaster. They had all seen their mighty ships burning in space. "The humans didn't win because they were stronger," Velthak continued. "They didn't win because they had better technology. They won because they fought like no species we've ever encountered before. They broke every rule of space combat. They did things that made no military sense. And somehow, that madness destroyed us." He walked closer to his officers, his footsteps echoing in the quiet room. "Before we can even think about returning home, before we can face our families and our government, we need to understand what happened out there. We need to know how 23 primitive ships managed to turn our greatest strength into our greatest weakness." The Admiral paused and looked each commander in the eye. "Because if we don't learn from this defeat, if we don't understand these humans, they will come for us next. And next time, we might not survive at all." 3 months before the disaster, everything had seemed so simple and easy for the Draxonian Empire. Their long-range scout ships were patrolling the outer edges of the galaxy, looking for new worlds to add to their growing collection of conquered planets. It was routine work that had been going on for decades. Scout Captain Mortex was having a boring day when his sensors picked up something interesting. A small blue and green planet orbiting a yellow star. What made it special was the radio signals coming from its surface. This meant intelligent life. More importantly, it meant another world they could conquer and control. Mortex ran the standard scans that all scouts were trained to do. He checked the planet's military strength, technology level, and population size. What he found made him laugh out loud in his cockpit. The beings on this planet, who called themselves humans, had barely figured out how to travel between their own local planets. Their most advanced spaceships looked like toys compared to Draxonian technology. The scout sent his report back to the main fleet, where it eventually reached Admiral Dae-Ho Kim. Dae-Ho was one of the Empire's most experienced commanders. He had personally overseen the conquest of over 50 different worlds. When he read the report about Earth, he almost didn't believe what he was seeing. "Their biggest warship is smaller than our scout vessels," he asked his assistant, reading the numbers again. "Are you sure these scans are correct?" The assistant nodded. "Yes, sir. The humans have managed to build 23 ships that could be considered military vessels, but even their flagship would barely qualify as a patrol boat by our standards. Their weapons are primitive projectile systems and basic energy beams. No plasma cannons, no quantum shields, no faster-than-light combat capability." Dae-Ho shook, his head in amazement. In all his years of military service, he had never encountered such a weak opponent. Most planets the Empire conquered had at least some advanced technology or powerful allies. Earth seemed to have neither. When the report reached the Empire's High Command, the War Council met to discuss their next move. The meeting lasted only 20 minutes. General Vexmore, the Empire's supreme military leader, stood up and pointed at Earth's location on the galactic map. "Gentlemen, this will be conquest number 848, he announced. "We'll send our standard invasion force and have this wrapped up before the week is over. It will serve as a perfect example to other systems that might be thinking about resisting our expansion." The plan was beautifully simple. They would jump their fleet into Earth's solar system, demand immediate surrender, and when the humans refused, they would destroy just enough of their ships to make the point clear. Then Earth would join the Empire peacefully, and the Draxonians could move on to more challenging targets. Nobody in that room imagined that this simple demonstration would turn into the greatest military disaster in their species' history. They had no idea that these primitive humans would soon teach them a lesson about warfare that would haunt them forever. The message arrived at Earth's United Defense Coalition headquarters at exactly 3:47 a.m. Seoul time. Admiral Harin Park was pulled from her sleep by the urgent beeping of her emergency communicator. She stumbled to her command center, still in her pajamas, expecting another routine training exercise alert. What she saw on the main screen made her blood run cold. A massive alien fleet had appeared at the edge of their solar system. The enemy ships were arranged in perfect formation, like a wall of death stretching across space. The computer was still counting them, but the number kept climbing. 1,000, 1,500, 2,000, 2,300 ships. Then came the message. The alien admiral's face appeared on screen, grey skin, large black eyes, and a voice that dripped with arrogance. He spoke in perfect English, which somehow made everything more terrifying. "Primitive humans of Earth," the alien said, "I am Admiral Velthak of the Draxonian Empire. Your world now belongs to us. You have 72 of your hours to surrender completely. Disarm your military, submit your leaders for processing, and prepare your population for integration into our empire. Resistance is futile and will result in the complete destruction of your species." The message ended with a detailed scan of Earth's military forces. The aliens knew exactly what humanity had: 23 military vessels scattered across different orbital stations and moon bases. The comparison was brutal. It was like bringing a pocket knife to fight an army with machine guns. Admiral Park stared at the screen long after the message ended. Around her, the command center buzzed with panicked activity. Officers were making frantic phone calls to world leaders. Others were running calculations, trying to find some way the numbers could be wrong. Admiral called out Lieutenant Minseo Jung from the communications station. "We're getting calls from every military base on Earth. They're all asking the same question. Do we surrender?" Harin closed her eyes for a moment. She thought about her daughter studying at university in Busan. She thought about her elderly parents who still lived in the countryside. She thought about the billions of humans who were sleeping peacefully, unaware that their world was about to end. But then something else crept into her mind. It was the tone in the alien admiral's voice, that smug certainty, the way he had called them primitive humans like they were insects to be stepped on, the casual dismissal of an entire species. "Admiral?" Lieutenant Young was still waiting for an answer. Harin opened her eyes and looked around at her crew. These were good people, brave people. They had joined the Defense Coalition knowing they might one day have to protect Earth, even if the odds were impossible. "Get me Captain Jae-woo on the Incheon," she said, her voice growing stronger, "and patch me through to every ship commander we have." Within minutes, 23 faces appeared on her screen, the captains of humanity's entire space fleet. Some looked terrified, others seemed angry. All of them were waiting for her to make the most important decision in human history. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harin said, straightening her uniform jacket over her pajamas, "we have a choice to make." The first human ships to die went down exactly as everyone expected. 3 Draxonian plasma beams hit the destroyer Seoul, and it simply vanished in a ball of white-hot energy. The cruiser Busan lasted maybe 10 seconds longer before enemy fire tore through its hull like paper. Captain Jae-woo watched from his command bridge as 2 more ships exploded around him. "This is suicide," his weapons officer whispered, staring at the tactical display. The Draxonian fleet was advancing in perfect formation. Hundreds of massive ships moving together like dancers who had practiced the same routine for centuries. But Admiral Park had spent the last 72 hours doing something no human military leader had ever done before. She had studied every piece of footage from the aliens' previous conquests. The Draxonian military had conquered 847 worlds, and they had recorded many of their battles as propaganda videos. What Park noticed was disturbing in a completely different way than anyone expected. The aliens always won, yes, but they always won the exact same way. Perfect formations, textbook maneuvers, overwhelming firepower applied in predictable patterns. They fought like a machine that had never learned to adapt. "All ships, this is Admiral Park," she broadcast to the remaining human vessels. "Forget everything you learned in military academy. Forget the rules. Forget what's supposed to be impossible. If we're going down, we're taking as many of them with us as we can." Captain Min-Ho Lee on the frigate Daegu was the first to understand what she meant. Instead of trying to outgun a Draxonian battleship, he aimed his ship directly at it and pushed the engines to maximum power. The aliens seemed confused by this move. Their return fire was hesitant, unsure. They had never seen a ship deliberately ram another vessel in space combat. The Daegu struck the alien battleship's side at tremendous speed. Both ships exploded, but the blast took out two more Draxonian vessels that had been flying too close in their perfect formation. "Did you see that?" shouted Lieutenant So Young Kim from the cargo hauler Gwangju. Her ship wasn't even supposed to be in combat. It was a converted mining vessel with improvised weapons bolted to its hull. The big one's shields went down for 3 seconds after the explosion. That small observation changed everything. The humans began sharing information in real time, something the rigid Draxonian command structure couldn't match. When Captain Hyunwoo Choi noticed that enemy ships always turned left when avoiding debris, he radioed the pattern to everyone. When the medical transport Ulsan discovered that Draxonian sensors couldn't track objects smaller than a car moving at high speed, that information spread through the human fleet in seconds. The aliens had superior technology, but humans had something they had never encountered: complete willingness to break their own ships if it meant damaging the enemy. Captain Yunseo Park deliberately detonated her ship's reactor next to a Draxonian cruiser, creating a debris field that blinded their sensors. The transport vessel Pohang used its cargo bay to launch hundreds of metal containers like bullets, forcing an entire alien squadron to break formation. "They're not adapting," Admiral Park realized as she watched the battle unfold. "They keep using the same tactics even though we're destroying them." The Draxonians had never faced an enemy crazy enough to turn every piece of space junk into a weapon, or desperate enough to sacrifice expensive military vessels for tiny tactical advantages. Admiral Velthak stared at his tactical display in growing confusion. The readout showed something that shouldn't have been possible. His fleet had destroyed over 40 human vessels in the past hour, but somehow there were more enemy contacts on his screen than when the battle started. "Commander," he called to his tactical officer, "explain to me how the humans have more ships now than they did an hour ago." The younger alien looked nervous as he checked his instruments. "Sir, they appear to be launching civilian vessels. Cargo ships, mining equipment, passenger transports. They're all being converted into military targets and sent directly at our fleet." Velthak couldn't believe what he was hearing. In all his years of conquest, no species had ever sacrificed civilian ships in military combat. It was unthinkable. Those vessels represented years of construction, billions of credits in resources, and irreplaceable infrastructure. But the humans were doing exactly that. From Earth's orbital shipyards came a steady stream of converted cargo haulers, their hulls painted with crude weapon mounts and explosive charges. Mining ships that normally dug asteroids were now ramming into Draxonian cruisers. Even luxury passenger liners had been stripped of their elegant interiors and filled with bombs. Captain Jae-woo Lee was flying one of the strangest vessels in this makeshift armada. He was only 24 years old, fresh out of the civilian racing circuit, where he had made a name for himself flying modified sport ships around asteroid courses. Now his racing craft had been loaded with every explosive the military could find. "Red Squadron, this is Lee," he radioed to the 11 other. racing pilots flying beside him. "Remember, we're not trying to win a race today. We just need to get close enough to hurt them." His squadron consisted entirely of young civilians who had volunteered when Earth's government asked for anyone with spaceflight experience. Racing, pilots, cargo runners, asteroid miners, even rich kids who owned their own pleasure craft. Anyone who could fly had been given a ship and asked to help save their planet. The Draxonian shields were designed to stop large, powerful weapons fired from military vessels. They had never been tested against dozens of small, fast ships attacking from every possible angle. When Lee's squadron split up and came at a battleship from 12 different directions, the alien defensive systems couldn't track them all. "I'm getting through," shouted Minji Park, a former asteroid miner flying a converted ore hauler. "Their shields can't cover everything at once." The ore hauler struck the battleship's lower hull and exploded, creating a hole that vented atmosphere and debris. It was a tiny amount of damage compared to what a proper military weapon might do, but it was still damage. And there were hundreds more converted civilian ships waiting to make similar attacks. What terrified Admiral Velthak wasn't just the losses his fleet was taking. It was the realization that humans seemed to view their own ships as completely expendable. Draxonian military doctrine was based on preserving valuable assets while achieving objectives. These humans were willing to trade 10 ships for one alien casualty and consider it a bargain. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're detecting more launches from the human planet. It appears to be pleasure yachts and racing ships, sir." Velthak felt something he had never experienced in centuries of military service, genuine fear of an inferior opponent. Captain Yunji Choi was knee-deep in alien wreckage when she made the discovery that would change everything. Her engineering team had been pulling pieces from a destroyed Draxonian fighter that had crashed into their ship's cargo bay. What they found inside made her heart race with excitement. "Look at this," she called to her chief engineer, holding up a glowing crystal about the size of her fist. "This thing is still putting out energy readings, even though the ship is dead. I think it's their power source." Engineer Sergeant Dong-hyun Kim ran his scanner over the crystal and whistled in amazement. "Captain, this little thing is generating more power than our entire reactor core. If we could figure out how to use it, then we do exactly that." Kyunji said firmly, "How long do you need? Give us 30 minutes and we'll have it wired into our weapons system." While her engineers worked frantically in the cargo bay, Yunji coordinated with other human ships that had managed to capture alien technology. The destroyer Mokpo had grabbed a piece of Draxonian armor plating. The cruiser Jeonju had recovered what looked like an alien communication device. Each ship was experimenting, trying to understand how the enemy technology worked. This kind of rapid adaptation was something the Draxonians had never encountered. Their own military doctrine required months of testing and approval before any new technology could be implemented. The humans were literally rebuilding their weapons in the middle of combat. "Captain Choi, this is the Mokpo," came a voice over the radio. "We figured out how to attach their armor to our hull. It's crude, but it's holding up against their plasma fire." "Excellent work," Yunji replied. "Send us the specifications. We'll try it on our ship too." Meanwhile, on the communications vessel, Jeju Lieutenant Minho Park was making his own breakthrough. As the fleet's best linguist and codebreaker, he had been assigned to monitor alien transmissions. What he discovered was almost too good to be true. "Admiral Park, you need to hear this," he radioed excitedly to the fleet commander. "The aliens are using unencrypted military frequencies. I can hear everything they're saying to each other." Admiral Ha-Rin Park's voice crackled back immediately. "Can you understand their language?" "Not yet, but I'm working on it. Their communication patterns are very rigid. They seem to use the same phrases over and over. Give me another hour and I think I can start feeding them false information." True to his word, Minho had cracked enough of the alien language within an hour to cause serious problems for the Draxonian fleet. He began broadcasting fake orders on their military frequencies, using the same rigid command structure they always followed. "Battle Group 7, retreat to defensive position Alpha," he transmitted in broken but understandable Draxonian. To the aliens, it sounded like a legitimate order from their command ship. The result was chaos. Draxonian ships began moving out of formation, expecting attacks that never came, and retreating from positions they should have held. Their rigid military hierarchy meant that lower-ranking ships never questioned orders. That came over official channels. Captain Yunji watched in amazement as enemy battleships turned away from her damaged cruiser, apparently following retreat orders that Minho had invented. At the same time, her engineers finished installing the alien power crystal, and their weapons suddenly had 3 times their normal firepower. "This is incredible," she muttered to herself. "We're learning faster than they can adapt." Admiral Herin Park's message to the Draxonian fleet was exactly what Admiral Velthak wanted to hear. The human commander was requesting a final meeting in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. She claimed her forces were beaten and ready to discuss surrender terms. Finally, Velthak said to his bridge crew, "These primitives are showing some sense." What he didn't know was that Admiral Park had been planning this moment for 3 weeks. While the initial battles raged across the solar system, she had secretly deployed her most valuable asset, Chief Engineer Sora Kim and her team of civilian mining specialists. Sora had spent her entire career blasting apart asteroids for their valuable metals. She knew the asteroid belt better than anyone alive, having worked there for 15 years. When Admiral Park approached her with an impossible plan, Sora had smiled and said, "Give me 3 weeks and some mining charges, and I'll turn this whole belt into the biggest weapon humanity has ever built." The work had been backbreaking and dangerous. Sora's teams had to move carefully through the asteroid field, installing equipment while staying hidden from Draxonian scouts. They converted large asteroids into remote-controlled kinetic missiles. They hollowed out smaller rocks and filled them with explosives. Most importantly, they built hidden weapon platforms that looked exactly like ordinary space debris. "Remember," Sora had told her teams over and over, "everything has to look natural. If the aliens suspect this is a trap, we're all dead." Now, as Admiral Velthak led 1-800 ships into the asteroid belt for the surrender ceremony, Sora was hiding inside a converted asteroid just 2 kilometers away from the enemy flagship. She could see the massive Draxonian vessels moving in their perfect formation, completely unaware of what was waiting for them. "Admiral Park," she whispered into her communicator, "they're in position. Every major ship is exactly where we want them." "Understood," came Park's reply. "All human vessels, this is your Admiral. Remember the plan. When the fireworks start, hit them from every direction, and don't stop until they're gone." The trigger for the ambush was simple. Admiral Park was supposed to meet Velthak's ship for negotiations. Instead, her cruiser suddenly accelerated and fired everything it had at the alien flagship. This was the signal Sora had been waiting for. "Light them up," she whispered, and pressed the detonation switch. What followed was the most spectacular explosion in human history. Hundreds of asteroids that had been converted into bombs went off simultaneously. The blasts created a chain reaction that turned peaceful space rocks into deadly projectiles flying in every direction. Hidden weapon platforms emerged from there, camouflage, and began firing at point-blank range into the sides of alien ships. The Draxonian fleet, packed tightly together for the formal surrender ceremony, found itself trapped in a 3-dimensional nightmare. Asteroids moving at incredible speed slammed into their hulls. Explosions erupted from rocks they had thought were harmless. Weapons fire came from directions where their sensors showed nothing but empty space. "It's an ambush," Admiral Velthak screamed at his bridge crew, but by then it was too late. His perfectly organized fleet was already falling apart as ships crashed into each other trying to escape the chaos. Human ships appeared from behind asteroids like ghosts, striking fast and disappearing again into the debris field before the aliens could respond. Commander Hyun-Ki Bae had never imagined he would witness the complete destruction of an alien armada from the bridge of his own dying ship. The human dreadnought Incheon was badly damaged. Its hull cracked open in 3 places, but somehow its main view screen still worked. Through it, he watched the most incredible military disaster he had ever seen. The Draxonian fleet, which had seemed so powerful and organized just minutes before, was now destroying itself in the asteroid field. Their tight formations, which had been their greatest strength in open space, had become a death trap among the floating rocks and debris. "Captain, look at this," called out Navigation Officer Ji Young-Lee, pointing at her tactical display. That battleship just crashed into 2 of its own cruisers trying to avoid an asteroid. Yun-Ki watched in amazement as the massive alien vessel, probably as long as a city block, spun out of control after taking damage from one of Sora Kim's hidden weapons. The ship's pilot was clearly trying to escape the asteroid field, but there were too many other Draxonian ships in the way. The battleship slammed into its allies, creating a chain reaction of collisions that took out 5 more vessels. Their communication system is falling apart, reported communications specialist Taemin Park. I'm picking up dozens of emergency signals all broadcasting at the same time. They're stepping all over each other's transmissions. The Draxonian military had designed their communication network for perfect coordination in open space battles. Every ship was supposed to report its status to Central Command, which would then issue new orders based on the complete tactical picture. But in the chaos of the asteroid field, with hundreds of ships taking damage simultaneously, the system couldn't handle the load. Emergency signals were jamming normal command channels. Damage reports were mixing with navigation warnings. Ships were receiving conflicting orders from different parts of their command structure. Some vessels were told to advance while others were ordered to retreat, causing them to crash into each other in the confined space. "There!" shouted Weapons Officer Min Seo Choi, pointing out the view screen. "Watch that destroyer try to turn around." The alien destroyer was attempting to reverse course and escape the asteroid field, but it was moving too fast and there wasn't enough room. As it spun around, its engines fired directly into a cruiser that was trying to do the same maneuver. Both ships exploded in a brilliant flash that lit up dozens of nearby asteroids. What made the disaster even worse was that the Draxonians kept trying to maintain their rigid military formations even as everything fell apart around them. Instead of breaking ranks and fleeing as individuals, they attempted to retreat in organized groups. This meant that when one ship was damaged or destroyed, it often took several others with it. Human ships, meanwhile, darted through the chaos like sharks attacking a wounded whale. Captain Yoonji Choi's cruiser appeared from behind a large asteroid, fired a full salvo into the side of an alien battleship, then disappeared again before the enemy could respond. The human vessels were small, fast, and operating independently, everything the Draxonian fleet was not. "Sir," reported Damage Control Officer Young-Ho Kim, "our main engines are back online. We could try to get out of here." Commander Hyun Ki shook his head. "Not yet. Keep recording everything. Command needs to see this. No one back on Earth will believe that we just watched the galaxy's most powerful fleet destroy itself." The alien armada continued its spectacular self-destruction, turning what should have been humanity's darkest hour into their greatest victory. Admiral Velthak looked around the war room one final time at the faces of his surviving commanders. These aliens had once been the pride of the Draxonian military. Now they looked like broken soldiers who had seen too much death and destruction. Some still had bandages from their injuries. Others couldn't stop their hands from shaking when they thought no one was looking. "The numbers don't lie," Velthak said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "We brought 2,300 ships to conquer one primitive planet. Today, fewer than 200 of those ships still exist. The rest are floating debris in Earth's solar system, or worse. They've been captured and are being studied by human engineers." Commander Zixara, whose ship had barely limped away from the battle, raised a trembling hand. "Admiral, surely the humans just got lucky. They can't possibly pose a real threat to our empire. They're still centuries behind us in technology." Velthak pulled up a holographic display showing recent intelligence reports. The images made several commanders gasp in shock. They showed human ships, but not the crude primitive vessels they had faced months ago. These were sleek, powerful warships that looked suspiciously familiar. "These are the ships humans are building now," Velthak explained. "Notice anything familiar about their design? They've taken our technology, the weapons, shields, and engines from our destroyed fleet, and they've improved it. In just 3 months, they've advanced their military capability by centuries." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans hadn't just defeated them. They had learned from them. Every piece of Draxonian technology that had fallen into human hands was being reverse-engineered, improved, and mass-produced. "But that's not the worst part," Velthak continued, bringing up another display. This one showed a map of nearby star systems with red dots indicating human activity. Our long-range sensors have detected human exploration vessels in 17 different systems. They're not staying on their home planet, they're expanding. Lieutenant Morketh, one of the youngest surviving officers, looked confused. Sir, I don't understand. Why is that such a problem? They're just exploring. Veltak's expression grew even more grim. Because they're not exploring like we do. When we expand into new systems, we look for worlds to conquer and populations to control. The humans are looking for allies. They're sharing their technology with other species. They're building a coalition. The true horror of the situation was starting to become clear. The Draxonian Empire had always succeeded because they fought each world individually. They would arrive, overwhelm the local defenses, and add another conquest to their list. But the humans were doing something different. They were creating a network of allies who were all learning to fight, using improved Draxonian technology. Every species they contact learns about our weaknesses, Veltak said. They know our ships can't handle swarm attacks. They know our communication systems break down under pressure. They know our rigid tactics make us predictable, and they're teaching all of this to their new friends. He paused and looked directly at each commander. We came to Earth planning, to add one more world to our empire. Instead, we created our greatest enemy. The humans aren't just survivors, they're teachers, organizers, and improvers. They turn everything they touch into something better than it was before. The warning was clear. Humanity wasn't just another conquered species. They were something the galaxy had never seen before.